Hello, Jay. Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you too. I'm just scanning your background.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
you're in the midst of the Texas Chainsaw collection right there. Those four shelves, and
Yep.
right there it's Chucky up there and pretty. That's the
Nice.
slasher section.
Okay, cool.
But I'm a big movie buff. I like the authors as well, and it's so cool to have a chat with you discussing that wonderful series of yours, Cursed Films. Man, I was so excited and eager to chat with you. I'm a big fan of all the films. It's like you made it for me, all the movies you covered, in season one.
I did make it for you. It's dedicated to you. The whole.
It's awesome. Seriously, I was listening to that. I forgot how good the soundtrack was for The Crow, and of course, The Exorcist, one of the most terrifying movie ever made. Oh, the rumors you debunked about the shoot of that movie, and of course, Poltergeist. It's one of the greatest. Big, Toby Hooper fan as well, and of course, The Omen. But we're not here.
Is that a laser disc?
It's a video disc.
Oh, video disc.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Even deeper.
Yeah.
So, Jay Cheel. Cheel. Okay. Writer, director, and executive producer and creator of Cursed Films. So first, I wanted to talk about storytelling, because it's amazing how the broken telephone thing, it goes into the aspect of urban legends. It's so fascinating. I was wondering, as a first question, what's your favorite one tied to the seventh art, to cinema?
Favorite urban legend. I mean, obviously we cover a lot of them in our show,
of course.
But so I'll give you two. I think within the series, the urban legend of the hanging munchkin, I am interested in just because of the legs that it has. Like the fact that
crazy.
It's so. Like you just have to think about it for a moment, and you immediately realize how insane it would be if that actually happened and no one noticed, and the logic of that doesn't quite work out. But people still perpetuate it because I think it speaks to that contrast of. Sorry, I have a siren. Get away for that to pass. There we go.
Thank you.
The contrast of such a dark image buried within a film that is kind of made
magical
for everyone.
Exactly.
I think that's an appealing story to tell. And another one which we haven't covered, but kind of I think led to my involvement in the series. I did a short documentary called Twisted, which was about the tornado that hit a drive-in theater.
Yes, I was about to ask you that if the idea of debunking those urban legends started there and back in 2016, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, that happened in my hometown, and was a rumor.
You're from Ontario, Niagara. Okay.
Yeah. So it was a rumor that everyone talked about, and it was one of those things where everyone knew someone who was there. And for people who don't know, a tornado hit the drive-in supposedly when the movie Twister was playing and tore the screen down. And even further to that, the story suggests that it hit during the scene in Twister when a drive-in is hit by a tornado. So in exploring that and just, what you were talking about, the idea of the telephone game, where every time this story is told, a little detail is added or something is changed or it's, slightly tweaked to make it a better story. And I think that speaks to all of the films that we're covering, like even the some of the ones with the tragic stories connected to them. These are things that people are just fascinated by and want to retell because there's an irony to a lot of it, especially when it is put up against the subject matter of a lot of these films. So, that is something that has fascinated me for sure.
And it resonates with a lot of us fans, and being a collector, and I watch all the extras and on all the movies that I own, because I want to know more about those, and the angle that you took with that series is so fresh and it's so original. So man, it's a stroke of genius. Congrats and thanks.
Thank you.
Hopefully going to be a few more seasons of that, because there's so many films to cover. So I was wondering about what's the most mind-blowing thing you learned during the course of producing those series?
I think in the Rosemarys Baby episode, which is available today, the story, the Victoria Vetri story is definitely a mind-blowing one. She was friends with Sharon Tate. She's in Rosemary's Baby. She was credited as Angela Dorian in the film, but
that's a small part.
Yeah. And there's actually a moment she's in the laundry room with Mia Farrow, and Mia Farrow is kind of looking at her and says, "Oh, I thought I recognized you. You look like the actress Victoria Vetri." So it's a little weird kind of meta moment, but her story is wild, and getting to speak with her about that, she was just such a wonderful woman, and just with a dark past, but just a vibrant, bright sort of soul that had a little bit of a unfortunate detour along her journey, and in addition to that, in the Rosemary's Baby episode, Julian Wasser, he was a photojournalist who'd spent a lot of his early years taking pictures at crime scenes for newspapers, but eventually became a well-regarded celebrity photographer, was hired by Roman Polanski to go up to Cielo Drive to take pictures of the crime scene, which is
so grim.
Such a strange thing. Like, why someone would want to turn this crime scene into a photo opportunity. But in addition to that, Polanski brought a psychic with him and was hoping that the psychic would be able to get vibes off of these Polaroid pictures that Julian was taking. And that is just, it speaks to the paranoia of the time, Polanski's own paranoia, and kind of mirrors the paranoia in the film, Rosemary's own conspiratorial thinking. So it was just such an interesting story that slotted into the episode thematically in such a nice way.
But, researching those movies, I was wondering, how do you get across, those elements? Because I had no idea about, the ramification of such, weird things that happen during and after the production of such movies, iconic movies.
Yeah. So part of it is just like some of it is what I know from being a film fan. Some of it is just what you kind of find generally on the internet. But we also work with a researcher named John Semley, who also helped with the production. And, sometimes you just come across, like, for example, Tom O'Neill in the episode, he wrote a book called Chaos about the Manson murders. And because we were going to interview Tom, reading Chaos, he talks about Julian Wasser going to the Polanski house. So through that, we then say, okay, we need to contact Julian. Then we get to Julian, and it kind of goes from there. And but often it's the most exciting part is when you're interviewing someone and they say, oh, you should talk to this person, and we get an email address or a number, and then we find them and we go interview them, and then they say, oh, did you hear about this? And it kind of like turns into an organic sort of investigation a little bit, and that's always the most exciting part of it.
On average, how much time does it take to produce like one episode? Or I guess all the episodes are produced at the same time, roughly?
Yeah, I think time is such a strange thing now because of the pandemic.
But, yeah, of course.
But I believe we started, I think it took about a year and a half, maybe. Okay. We did a lot of filming for this season. and we did a lot of traveling. This is one thing that I think differentiates this season from the first, is covering films like Stalker and Cannibal Holocaust. We ended up going to Rome.
Locations.
And we went to Ukraine, which, obviously cutting that episode now with everything that's going on there was a very strange experience, but it was such an amazing place. And when in Ukraine, we went to Chernobyl, which was just such a great experience.
Wow.
So lots of traveling, more of an international feel. We wanted to go to Haiti for the Serpent episode, but we couldn't get there. But we did hire a crew in Haiti to film some stuff for us, and that stuff was great. So, but yeah, it was a big production. And then, I'm editing the 5 episodes.
Yep.
So while we're traveling, I can't be cutting. So we did all the shooting, and then I came back and I spent like 5 months cutting the episodes, I think 5 or 6 months.
And it looks awesome because you have all those fresh faces as well. People that you're not used to seeing in documentaries on those movies, which makes it so much more interesting. And I learned so many things. I was fortunate enough to watch the first 2 episodes, Rosemary's Babies and The Wizard of Oz. And during Rosemary's Baby, I didn't know that the Paramount Studios were built on the natural cemetery, which resonates with me so much because of the poltergeist connection. Of course, it was an inspiration. So,
well, I mean, that's a good example of, I didn't know that until he said it on that tour. So, that's Scott Michael, and he's a tour guide. He has his own museum. I don't think his museum is open anymore because of the pandemic, but a museum dedicated to tragic stories in Hollywood, and he's just like a walking encyclopedia. He actually was an advisor on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and helped Tarantino find some locations, and kind of was like a historical advisor. But he just like that fact is pretty wild. Like whether or not you believe in the supernatural, just that idea that a cemetery was, cut in half in a movie studio, was built on half of it, is such a wild idea.
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't know either that Samuel Davis Jr. was a Satanist, and he was really open about that back in the days. So that's another
strange connection. I mean, it really felt like Rosemary's Baby in particular could be like a full feature documentary on the making of that film, because there's obviously stuff like really wanted it to be about the time that the film that came out. Like I wanted it to be a portrait of the late 60s.
Yeah.
But there's obviously things beyond that get very complicated and very gross in terms of Polanski. And we didn't really touch on that in this episode because it was outside of the sphere of that time frame. But the hope is that everyone knows what ultimately where that goes, and can kind of like look at everything happening in the period of this film and kind of the tragic stuff before Polanski made Rosemary's Baby. And just, it's just such a weird connection of all of these events, all like directed at him. And it's both tragic and also just
surreal.
Yeah. It's strange.
Of course. And, with a movie like The Wizard of Oz, which was produced in the 30s, I guess it was what the oldest film that you covered through that series. I guess it made it, challenging to find, people to talk about that production.
Yeah, I that was a concern initially, but luckily, talking to the children of the actors who are now themselves grandparents, and they are kind of historians in themselves, like they not just on their parents' role in that production, but on Oz in general. So it's just such a an important film for so many people that it can't help but be a huge part of their lives. So
like
it was great.
Judy's daughter,
Lorna. Yeah, Lorna Luft was.
She's great.
It was great getting to talk to her. She's very kind of like level-headed and very direct about her thoughts on
honest.
Yeah, everything involving her mom in the studio. And I loved the story from Hamilton, Missouri about Margaret Hamilton, his mom, involving her burn. She got burned on the production, and she was such a caring person, a caring soul who had a background teaching kindergarten and was very worried about how kids perceived her as this wicked witch. And with her son, she was covered in bandages because of this accident. And she called the nanny and said, "Tell my son that I'm trying out a new costume. I'm going to be a mummy in a movie." And that helped him, you know, deal with the trauma of seeing his mom covered in these bandages. And I just thought that was such a sweet story.
I totally agree. And there's so many tragic things that happen, you know, around that movie I was really not aware of. And it's really a touching. It's probably one of the most touching episodes that you directed. And you talked about the munchkin hanging in the background. That's an insane story. And I was really happy to see the great Neil Hamburger on screen because, you know, I'm a big movie and music lover. So Neil Hamburger, he also was, you know, as Greg Turkington and many aliases. He was in many metal bands, and, you know, he was managing Mr. Bungle as well. So he shows up in your episode telling the story about the munching. You know, I was wondering about how did he get involved?
Well, Greg Turkington is a co-host of On Cinema at the Cinema, a movie review show with Tim Heidecker. And Greg is an Oz expert. He's a certified Oz expert and holds some very interesting perspectives and opinions on the movie The Wizard of Oz. When telling that hanging munchkin story, I mean, it's been debunked pretty heavily, but there are people that are holding on to that legend because it's just so like appealing for whatever, even though it's dark, it's just like we said before, it's just such a weird contrast. So having him in the episode to represent that side of the story, the people who want to hang on to this but end up perpetuating it as well, and the Oz historians have to continually push back against that, and it kind of annoys them, you know. Like, so that was the you know, the goal with that was to represent that other side. And it's always a weird thing with this show because, you know, we can cover something like that and it could seem like, well, why talk about this? It's been debunked. And it's not, our show isn't setting out to like prove or disprove these things. The show is about people's interest in these stories.
That's right.
So I want to hear why someone wants to believe that, and I also want to hear why it's not true. And that
both sides,
those sides bumping up against each other is what's interesting. So so Greg was a great addition, and
it was so fun to see, you know, old VHS being compared, you know, on screen, because I'm a big collector of VHS as well. So, you know, I was really happy. And talking about, you know, debunking stuff, Adam Savage is in the episode as well from Mythbusters. So how cool is that to be able to have that guy bring his enthusiasm to the show to talk about that infamous, you know, makeup.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the nice things about doing the show is I love Adam Savage. I've been a fan of his for quite some time, and I love Tested, his YouTube channel, and all of his prop building. And I thought, okay, this is the chance to get to force Adam Savage to talk to me. So, but it was perfect because, you know, they did an episode on that Buddy Ebsen story. And also just talking to someone who made a career out of busting myths, and a lot of their episodes were film based. So asking him what his thoughts are on debunking myths and whether or not you lose some sort of magic when you reveal that something isn't true, that was amazing. You know, he was, as an interview subject, I kept saying his interview was like concentrated orange juice, because it was shorter than all of the others, but the amount of information that he put out in that interview, like I could ask him anything and he would have a great answer. So it was a dream getting to talk to him.
It was great. It was awesome. So I cannot wait to watch the 3 remaining episodes. What can you tell us about the Serpent and the Rainbow episode?
So the Serpent and the Rainbow, the big thing with that story is essentially a Hollywood film crew going to Haiti after a revolution, wanting to honor the people of Haiti and the voodoo religion, and, you know, be as authentic as possible, but maybe being a little bit naive and thinking that they could just go into this country and film for a period of time without facing any problems. So they end up facing problems. But a big part of that episode is about the bonding experience of that as well. That through
with the locals?
Well, with each other, like through that adversity, that all of because they were all very young, like outside of the producers and Wes Craven, they hired a lot of young people to come to Haiti with them. And it became this formative experience for all of them, and kind of it was the beginning of their careers. So it's an interesting one because everything they went through kind of brought them closer together. But also I love that episode because we talked to Wade Davis, who I don't know if a lot of people know that The Serpent and the Rainbow is based off of a real book. Like, it's a real story. Bill Pullman's character, his name is Dennis in the film, but he's playing Wade Davis, and Wade Davis is an anthropologist. He's Canadian. And he went to Haiti to investigate this rumored powder that would make people seem as though they're dead for a period of time. And he was hired to do so because of the potential for such a powder to be used in anesthesia, like in the medical industry. So he went down to Haiti and just got completely immersed in that world. And
the culture.
Yeah, the book is amazing. The book is great. And he wanted, once the book was optioned, he was hoping to get Peter Weir to direct the film, and it was hoping it would be a kind of more straightforward, like, telling of his story. But Wes Craven came aboard, and I think everyone seems to think Wes Craven also wanted it to be straightforward. But because Wes Craven is Wes Craven,
expectations were that was about to be a horror movie, of course. Yeah,
the studio kind of pushed him to add a lot of stuff that turned it more towards a, Nightmare on Elm Street vibe in the last act. So, but it's a great episode. I really loved that one.
Yes, and of course, the one of the most infamous movie, Cannibal Holocaust. We know, everybody that loves extreme cinema knows that Rogero Deodato was prosecuted because people thought he killed people for real. So how cool was that to debunk that fact?
Yeah, I mean, talking to Rogero, I think his interview was our longest.
Oh yeah,
partly because he was speaking in Italian and we had to interpret it, but we talked to him for 5 hours in a restaurant, and he just laid it all out. And there might be stories in there that hardcore fans have heard before, but I think some of the perspective of, like, we talked to Luca Barbareschi, who's in the film as one of the crew members, and he rarely talks about his experience on Cannibal Holocaust. And I think it's just an interesting collection of voices just telling you right from, their witness testimony what happened and how grueling that shoot was, and how maniacal Deodato could be. But also discussing the place that Cannibal Holocaust has in, horror cinema history,
the impact, the influence.
Yeah, Italian genre cinema history, and also the idea of like blurring the line between documentary and reality, or documentary and fiction, which I'm always interested in. And so I'm hoping that one will be both a great, telling of this adventure to the Amazon to shoot this film, but also surrounding that a bit of an analysis of the value of Cannibal Holocaust.
Because it is such a hard movie to watch. It's extreme because of so many things. I don't want to watch it again anymore.
Neither do I.
But I'll gladly watch your episode on that, because you got so many aspects to it, and I'm really excited.
I can say the episode is like, it deals with extreme content. There's a lot of talk about things that are unsettling, but it's not, we're not, anyone worried about the animal stuff, I don't think has to worry about watching the episode.
Great. And what about the other one? Was Stalker. You talked about it a little bit. You went to Ukraine.
Yeah, Stalker is kind of the interesting odd man out in this collection, because I think it's a film that some people, maybe a lot of people, will not have seen, which is kind of exciting because I'm a huge fan of that film and Andrei Tarkovsky, the director, and the stories surrounding it are just amazing. I mean, this is a movie that was shot in Tallinn, which is now in Estonia, and they spent like a number of weeks shooting and discovered that the film stock they were using was defective and had to scrap the whole production and go back out and refilm. And people got sick because they were spending time in these polluted rivers downstream from a power plant. And some people think that the film predicted Chernobyl, which is why we went to Chernobyl. And it's just kind of a weird, like, art influencing real life, because Chernobyl, the exclusion zone that's blocked off that people can't get into. In Stalker, there's a place called the Zone that this stalker brings people into. He gets paid to bring them into this zone to go to a place called the Room, where you can make your wishes come true. And it suggests that the zone was created because of a meteorite landing, like some extraterrestrial event happened. And with Chernobyl, you have the exclusion zone that's blocked off, and then you have people called stalkers who bring people into Chernobyl to tour them around the place. And it's like a weird mixing of, that film inspiring real life. So that was amazing, getting to go through Chernobyl and see how it's just such a strange vibe at that place. Partly because of it being abandoned, but also the attempts at turning it into a tourist attraction are really weird.
Definitely. Now I do have, I have to confess, I haven't seen Stalker yet. So I have to do my homework, watch the movie and watch the episode. So thanks so much, Jay, to taking the time today to chat about Cursed Films Season 2. Great fan of the whole thing. Keep doing those episodes, man. Season 3, hopefully. So
hopefully, yeah. We'll see. Thank you so much.
Cheers, man.